We're live for the third week in a row, reacting to some college football playoff committee rankings. Exciting times here. We'll see what happens. I feel like every time I start these things, I kind of talk about what happens with the SEC. Is this going to finally be the week that I don't want to say the committee comes to their senses, but I'm almost like waiting for that shoe to drop where it almost feels too good to be true that Penn State would stay above these two-loss SEC teams. Not saying the SEC team should be ahead of them, but going back to that first week when I was kind of where I was expecting Penn State to be, I'm surprised the committee likes Penn State as much as they do, but they have their reasons. Top 15 offensive team, top 5 defensive team, maybe top 10 defensive team by just about every metric. Super efficient, both offensively and defensively. Just not a lot of holes on the team, and they're really taking care of business. I mean, the Bowling Green game was a frustrating one. The going to overtime with USC was a frustrating one, but like looking at the numbers and once again using that word efficiency, Illinois they're looking at it as like a more dominant win than the score showed. Same thing with Wisconsin. So these like 5-6 win teams that Penn State's been beating, they add up, and even though you don't have that ranked win, that top 15 ranked win, clearly the committee likes them. So key things to watch tonight. 1, right off the bat, does Illinois get ranked again? Illinois should, in the AP poll, they got number 24. So do we see them jump into the rankings here with some losses from some other teams that are ranked down there, notably Missouri? So we'll see on that front. That'll be an important part to watch because for whatever reason, because we're stupid, whether Illinois is ranked number 27 or 23, like that matters because we decided that 25 is the number that we care about. So looking at Illinois, be nice if they can continue to win so they stay ranked. Interested to see what happens with BYU. They were ranked, and I'm just pulling up the rankings last week. They ranked 6th last week. How far did they drop? I don't think it's going to be too surprising that the Big 12 is basically a one-bid conference at this point, but still curious where a one-loss BYU is at, given some of their wins. We'll see what happens with the SEC teams. I mean, that's kind of talk about a conundrum because you have Tennessee, you have Alabama, you have Ole Miss, and you have Georgia, all at 2 losses. And depending upon how you look at it, right, Tennessee's beaten Alabama, but Alabama's beaten Georgia. But Ole Miss is beating Georgia, but yet Georgia has a win over Tennessee, and Georgia has a win over Texas, which is, at this point, looked at as the best win, right, going into Texas and winning by 15 points. So it's gotten so convoluted and confusing that I don't even know if you can simply just go off of head-to-head because there's no way to rank them in any type of order that would make sense head-to-head, right? You would need to have Alabama and Ole Miss ahead of Georgia. You need to have Georgia ahead of Tennessee, but yet you would still need to have Tennessee ahead of Alabama. So there's just going to be no way that makes sense. So even in the head-to-head sense, they might have to look at other factors, worse losses, things like that, how they're winning. So we'll see. I think that we see, at least SEC-wise, I think you see Alabama as the leader at that pack there. I think it still stays Ole Miss ahead of Georgia. It's just crazy to me that you look at Ole Miss and you look at Georgia, and they both would have 2 losses, that 2 weeks after Ole Miss beats them, that you're then able to put Georgia ahead of them. But so I don't know. It's tough. I really don't envy where the committee's at with trying to figure all that out because no matter what they do, not everyone is going to be happy. So we'll see. And then obviously just curious where Penn State goes. I mean, Penn State should stay at 4. There's really nothing that happened the last week that should change things. I know I've seen like Andy Staples of On3 he projects Ole Miss to be the 7 seed, and this is down the line. He has Ole Miss to be the 7 seed, Penn State to be the 10 seed. At least I believe it's Penn State the 10 seed. I'm trying to think if they're 10 or 9. Either way, if Ole Miss was the 11 seed last week, and Penn State was Ole Miss was the 11th ranked team last week, and Penn State was the 4th ranked team. I don't know what's happened in these next 2 weeks and what happened this past week and then these next 2 weeks that would drastically switch the committee's opinion on Ole Miss versus Penn State, other than a loss from Penn State. But if Penn State goes 11-1, right? They beat Minnesota the way that they're supposed to. Let's say, I think they're favored by 12.5, 13.5. Say they win in that 2-touchdown area. And then they beat Maryland as expected, and Ole Miss takes care of business. I don't know who they have off the top of my head, but I do know that the strength of schedule for Penn State and Ole Miss these next 2 weeks. Penn State is 48, Ole Miss is 49, or at least it's something along those lines. Ole Miss they go to Florida, tough game, and then they play Mississippi State at home. Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC. So I don't know what would really happen for Penn State to drop below Ole Miss, but I guess we'll see. So I don't think it's so much about does the SEC, despite the fact of what I put well, I guess I didn't put in the title, but in the description for this episode, I don't really think that we'll see SEC teams jump Penn State, but do we see some of these SEC teams? Do we see a Georgia, a Bama, or Ole Miss jump Miami, jump Notre Dame? Certainly we'll see them jump BYU. So curious to see what happens here. Starting right off, I'm seeing that we have Illinois at 25. So there we go. Penn State ranked win. Now everyone's happy. Instead of Illinois being 26 and Penn State not having a ranked win, they're ranked 25 and they have a ranked win. Missouri being in the rankings at 23, at 7-3 is very, very silly. Very silly. Missouri is not a very good team. UNLV gets in there at 24. We have Iowa State at 8-2. They're now ranked as well. Right. So good news. Illinois gets ranked, so Penn State can have that ranked win. Pulling up Illinois' schedule here, just take a look at it. I believe they're going to be favored in the last 2 games. They go to Rutgers and they go to Northwestern. So I would say those should be 2 wins, but Rutgers has been playing better lately. They got their running back. Just beat Maryland. They beat Minnesota the week before. So hopefully Illinois can overcome that and remain ranked for good old Penn State, because we can use all the help we can get. All right, they're talking about Arizona State right now, just in case you're watching along with me. We get Tulane at 20. Just popped up on my screen. All right, while we wait for this 20 through 15 area, again, just want to reiterate, think that at this point we're basically down to 1 ACC bid, 1 Big 12 bid, and then the at-larges will be Penn State, Notre Dame. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens to Indiana, Ohio State. I know a lot of people are saying what happens in that game. I've heard like Saul Verbal, for example, they've said that they think Indiana is locked into a playoff spot. I don't believe that to be the case. I think what they do against Ohio State, how they look, is gonna play a big impact. So even though the committee's giving Indiana a lot of credit right now, right, ranking on number 5, they also had BYU ranked number 6, and we're gonna see where BYU falls to. But there's a good chance that at the end of this, and this is assuming that Texas beats Texas A&M, which that would just be the funniest part, would be Texas A&M beating Texas. But I think it will end up coming down to a 1-loss Indiana team versus a 2-loss Tennessee team. I think Ole Miss, I think Georgia, I think Bama, provided everything that we think happens. I think that's what we'll come down to. But we'll see this weekend. We'll learn a lot about Indiana. BYU drops down to 14. They drop 8 spots. That is not a good sign for Indiana, a team that, doesn't have a lot of impressive wins, does not have an impressive resume. I see a lot of people saying Penn State and Indiana in the same breath as far as resume goes. Penn State's strength of schedule has been much tougher. But if Indiana dropped 8 spots, right, they go from 6 all the way down to 14. And Indiana's at 5. Now, granted, Indiana's playing Ohio State. BYU lost to a Kansas team that is causing a lot of damage in the Big 12 right now, but not particularly strong Kansas team. I believe they already have 7 losses. So we see what happens, but that's a big, big drop. 8 spots is a big drop for a team that you quote unquote, liked just a week ago. So wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar to that with Indiana next week, but we'll save that for next week. All right, we have SMU at 13. They jump up one spot. And as I believe as Booker McFarland just said, they have 9-1 SMU above 9-1 BYU, despite the fact that they both played each other and BYU won. Very interesting. Once again, you think the games would matter. At some point, these results have to matter. But apparently, 9-1 SMU, 9-1 BYU. The committee thinks SMU is the better team, despite the fact that BYU beat them. All right, Boise State stays at 12. No surprise there. I know some people have been talking up Tulane. They could potentially steal that group of 5 spot. But I don't think so. All right, we have Tennessee as the first of those 2-loss SEC teams. That is not too surprising at all. They're at 11, which means that I don't believe that they would be in the rankings. All right, we have Georgia at 10. Georgia at 10. So they move up 2 spots. They were 12 last week, so they should be back in the rankings. Then we have Ole Miss. They jump up 2 spots. And this is the big test right here. Do we get Alabama? Or are they going to give extra credit? I don't think that they can give extra credit to Alabama. They're not giving it to Ole Miss, though. So this should be Bama. It should not be Miami and Notre Dame coming up next. Georgia at 10. Ole Miss at 9. Should be Bama coming up here at 8. It's Miami at 8. Okay, so that is a change. That's a change. Miami technically moves up 1 spot because they were 9th last week. But Bama had to jump them because Bama was number 10 last week. Miami was 9. And there we go. Alabama at number 7. That is not that big of a deal, I think, Penn State-wise. I continue. It's at least I guess it's a big deal in the sense. All right, then we have Notre Dame at 6. I'll keep our thoughts for a second. Notre Dame at 6. All right, we should have Indiana at 5, and then Penn State at 4. I'll come back to that Bama thought here in a second, and what that means for the SEC, and in particular Penn State. All right, so we're just going chalk here now. Indiana at 5. We'll get Penn State here at 4. They'll have Texas at 3, Ohio State at 2, and Oregon at 1. All right. Alabama at number 7, jumping Miami. Shouldn't mean too much for Penn State. I continue to believe, and we talked a little bit about this, maybe Penn State, I think, absolute best case scenario, Penn State gets the 6th seed. The only issue that will come with that is that if they want to give the 6th seed to the SEC, more likely than not, the loser of Ohio State, Oregon will get the 5 seed, whether it's a 2-loss Ohio State team, whether it's going to be a 1-loss Oregon team. Pretty confident that they're going to give the 5 seed to the Big Ten loser. The SEC championship is 1-loss Texas versus 2-loss Alabama, which if things go chalk in the SEC, which, who really knows, the SEC is amazing and perfect and daunted, and anyone can beat anyone. And we're so lucky that they're in college football and they're not just playing in the NFL because they're so much better than everybody else. But besides that, if everything happens like we expect, it will be Bama versus Texas in the SEC title game. Do they put Alabama at 6 or do they put Penn State at 6? That will be the question. Let's say that Texas beats Alabama in the SEC title game. I have been of the opinion and continue to be of the opinion that they are going to give that SEC team the 6th seed, that they're not going to penalize a team for making it to the conference championship game, specifically in the Big Ten and the SEC in particular, which I don't blame, right? Alabama shouldn't be punished because they made their conference championship game and Penn State wasn't able to make theirs. So I understand that. All right, they're showing the brackets now, but we can get to that in a second. So Bama jumping, Miami doesn't. I mean, it's a little weird. I don't know how you move Bama up over Miami, but not Ole Miss, considering Ole Miss beat Georgia in a more impressive sense. And I would imagine that's going to be their argument that, right, Alabama's win over Georgia now looks more impressive. But yeah, I mean, it's like I opened the stream with. I don't envy where they're at with these SEC teams. They're all 2 losses because you can literally argue against anything that they say. All right, so Penn State, they're showing the brackets now. Penn State would stay in that 6th seed as they were last week. They're really, really taking their time. All right, so it'd be Penn State, Georgia. Last week it was Penn State, Ole Miss. This week it'd be Penn State, Georgia in Happy Valley. BYU at Ohio State, Alabama at Notre Dame, Ole Miss at Indiana, and Georgia at Penn State. So we'll see. I mean, Notre Dame at 8. That is, man. I mean, I guess we'll see what Indiana really. It matters how they view Indiana next week. What happens in this Ohio State game? Because if they have Indiana as the 7 seed, currently undefeated, and they lose to Ohio State, let's say by 2 touchdowns, I don't think that Indiana is hosting a playoff game. I think Indiana will have to be going on the road, in which case you'll have a little bit of movement. And is there a way that Penn State can get Indiana? Is there a way that Penn State can get Notre Dame? As much as we're making fun of the SEC, or as much as I'm making fun of the SEC, I will be honest with you guys, I would rather play Notre Dame or Indiana than play Georgia, Bama, or Ole Miss. So that's kind of the question now for Penn State, because once again, I don't know. Short of Penn State just throwing up on themselves these next 2 weeks, I just don't think that there's going to be enough for Georgia or for Ole Miss to be able to jump Penn State. Bama, yes. If they make the SEC title game, or whoever makes the SEC title game, and even if they lose to Texas, I do expect that second SEC team to be the 6th seed. But good week for Penn State that those SEC teams didn't move too close, right? You don't want to see a massive jump from that trio of Bama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. Bama moves a little bit, but not too bad otherwise. So, all right, we will be back tomorrow night or Thursday morning. We're still trying to figure out when we're going to release the Minnesota preview. We'll be back here to preview Minnesota, and then we'll be back on Saturday to recap what is hopefully another Penn State win. So thank you, as always, for joining these live streams. Really have fun reacting to this, and you can see my brain working in real time. But thanks for joining. Make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you like this video as well. Liking the video helps helps the algorithm on YouTube get it out to other people so we can grow this channel. So make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're liking. Appreciate the support as always. We will see you guys the next time.